This is the seventh video in a series related to the Liberty Hill 2040 Comprehensive Plan. If you haven't already seen the other videos in this series, there are links in the description below. This video discusses growth scenarios, which will be the subject of the next set of public input opportunities in June. As we cover these two contrasting scenarios, it's important to remember a few specific elements that are constant across both scenarios. The planning horizon for the comprehensive plan is through 2040, and in that time the city expects to see 85,000 new people arrive in the area. In both of these scenarios, we are attempting to understand the fiscal ramifications of development decisions that the city will be making between now and then, as well as understanding the trade-offs that those scenarios provide. First, we'll take a look at Scenario 1, which explores the outcomes associated with adding those 85,000 new residents in the development pattern that we currently see happening around the Liberty Hill area today. This means that we're looking at both the current land use in the city, as well as the land values and service costs from around Liberty Hill. Information for this model has come principally from the land use fiscal analysis done at the outset of this comprehensive planning process. Scenario 1 accepts the largely suburban development pattern we currently have in the area, and also assumes that growth is not constrained by geographic limitations on infrastructure. Instead, infrastructure would, in this scenario, be funded by development irrespective of its long-term maintenance costs, as is generally done today. We find that this scenario does generate a large amount of new property value, almost $9 billion. But because of the large amount of horizontal expansion of infrastructure, service costs, which include appropriate savings or spending on roads, an extra $47 million in new costs are generated every year. This makes the burden to each household to pay for these services, on average, about $3,000. We also find that 11 square miles of land must be newly developed to accommodate for these 85,000 new people. In these last two lines, we see the fiscal costs of this pattern continuing. We could either accept a yearly deficit of almost $7 million, or we could elect to raise taxes to make up the difference, a full 16% above what we currently have today. Scenario 2 explores the fiscal ramifications of adopting a managed growth plan and a development pattern which is more mixed. This scenario takes values generated by a more compact pattern of development and concentrates that growth directly adjacent to infrastructure that the city has already paid for. As a result, those investments are maximized. Notably, this scenario actually generates more in service costs than Scenario 1, $57 million yearly versus $47 million. This is mainly due to the fact that a more compact pattern of development uses more total street infrastructure than a suburban pattern. But it also generates a much higher value across the city, $17.5 billion versus about $9 billion in Scenario 1. What that means is that the city is actually beginning to have a pattern of development which can produce more value than it takes to maintain it at today's tax rate. This means that the surplus could be used to fund things like more park facilities and activities, items which have been constantly noted throughout this comprehensive planning process as necessary in Liberty Hill. This pattern of development also consumes much less land, leaving more available for natural and public spaces. While the fiscal picture does appear to be fairly clear when comparing these scenarios, there are a number of trade-offs which are important to understand. First, Scenario 1 is principally populated by single-family homes, where Scenario 2 opens up the possibility of more housing choice, such as townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and cottage courts. Scenario 1 requires more horizontal expansion of underground utilities. This is largely because a suburban pattern of development takes up more land area, requiring water and wastewater lines to extend farther, faster. Because of the growth management plan that's a part of Scenario 2, existing in-ground infrastructure is used as the principal factor in determining how far out immediate growth should be directed. In Scenario 1, commercial uses are largely going to hug major commercial corridors like 29, 183, and Ronald Reagan. But Scenario 2 makes allowances for a much smaller scale of commercial development to happen in and around existing and new neighborhoods. These are uses like small coffee shops, restaurants, and neighborhood scale services. Because Scenario 1 expands so much horizontally, naturally making distances between different activities farther apart, the current auto-first paradigm will continue. In Scenario 2, as we begin to thicken the existing city and spread activities and destinations throughout our community, getting to activities can become possible on foot or other non-automobile conveyances. Scenario 1 presumes a much higher proportion of rural and estate-sized lots in development, where Scenario 2 creates a higher proportion of compact neighborhood patterns. And finally, in Scenario 1, principally because the predominant housing type is single-family detached houses, costs are determined primarily by the size of the structure and the size of the lot, where Scenario 2's more diverse mix of housing provides less disparity between supply of middle-scale housing and demand for these same units. Consultants from Verdunity will be in the City of Liberty Hill to solicit feedback on these scenarios and receive feedback on which trade-offs are acceptable and preferred by the community in June. To learn more or stay updated on progress on the plan, please visit lhtx2040.com.